On 20 September 2024, Apple put the iPhone 16 Pro Max on sale in the UK. The price for the base model, 256 gigabytes of storage, was £1,199. No case included. No charger in the box. Just the phone. That price didn't appear from nowhere. In June 2007, when Steve Jobs walked onto a stage in San Francisco and said, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone," the original iPhone cost $499. 17 years later, the successor costs more than twice that, and adjusted for inflation, closer to 3 times. Nobody made Apple do this. Plenty of alternatives exist. Samsung, Google, and a dozen others sell perfectly capable smartphones for £300 or £400. The Android ecosystem handles calls, email, photos, and apps just as well. And yet, in 2024, Apple held 54% of U.S. smartphone sales. Among iPhone owners in America, 89 to 92% say they'll buy another iPhone when they next upgrade, depending on the survey. The equivalent figure for Samsung is around 77%. People are choosing the expensive option and choosing it again. So the question isn't whether people pay £1,199 for a phone. They demonstrably do. The question is why. And the answer, when you work through the actual numbers, is considerably stranger than "it's a nice product." Start with manufacturing. When the iPhone 16 Pro Max launched in September 2024, teardown analysts at Counterpoint Research went to work. They priced every component: the A18 Pro chip, the titanium chassis, the camera sensors, the OLED display. Their estimate for the total bill of materials? Approximately $485. The phone retails for $1,199 in the US, £1,199 in the UK. So before you account for assembly labor, shipping, marketing, or any of Apple's other overheads, the raw component gap is around $714 per phone. Here's how to make sense of that. Apple's overall hardware gross margin for FY 2024, phones, Macs, iPads, all physical products, was 37.2%. For every £100 Apple receives from selling hardware, it keeps about £37 after paying for the hardware itself. Compare that to Samsung. Samsung's hardware division operates at a gross margin somewhere between 15 and 20%, and that segment includes not just phones, but televisions, home appliances, and memory chips. Apple earns roughly twice the hardware margin of its nearest rival, on phones alone. A 37% hardware margin is already extraordinary in an industry where thin margins are the norm. But here's the thing, that's not actually where Apple makes its real money. In October 2017, Apple launched the iPhone X. It was the first iPhone to come within a pound of the 4-figure threshold, £999 for the base model in the UK. Something shifted that weekend. Not in the technology, in the culture. The iPhone X was not obviously superior to a Samsung Galaxy S8, which had launched earlier that year at £689. Both had OLED displays. Both had strong cameras. Both ran apps smoothly. One cost £310 more. Reviewers still reported queues outside Apple stores on launch day. Economists have a name for goods where higher price increases rather than decreases demand. They call them Veblen goods. A Rolex tells time no better than a Casio. A business class seat gets you to the same airport. What it does is signal, to others and to yourself, that you are the sort of person who chose this. Tim Cook understands this precisely. In September 2018, on Good Morning America, justifying the iPhone XS pricing, he said, "Your phone has replaced your digital camera and your video camera. It's replaced your music player. It's replaced your video player." Then, most people pay about $30 a month for it, or $1 a day. The framing is deliberate. £1,199 is a frightening number. £30 a month, spread over a 3-year upgrade cycle, is a coffee. The high price doesn't push buyers away. For the audience Apple has cultivated, it signals that this is the one worth having. Here's where the mechanism gets interesting. Apple's pricing isn't just about status, it's about what happens after you buy the phone. The moment you activate an iPhone, you're enrolled in a set of services designed to make switching to any other phone increasingly painful. iMessage, iCloud, AirDrop, FaceTime, your notes, your reminders, your photos, syncing silently between every Apple device you own. Each one of these is useful on its own. Together, they become a gravity well. Consider iCloud. By August 2024, according to consumer intelligence research partners, roughly two-thirds of U.S. Apple customers were paying for iCloud storage, at 99 cents a month for 50 gigabytes, $2.99 for 200, or $9.99 for 2 terabytes. Your photos are in there, your documents, 5 years of backups. Switching to Android means extracting all of it, reformatting it, and starting again. Most people don't. The result is a loyalty rate most companies can only dream of. In the United States, 89 to 92% of iPhone users buy another iPhone when they upgrade. That is not brand love alone. That is architecture. Apple built a suite of services that are individually useful and collectively inescapable, and then made the iPhone the only device those services work best on. And once you're inside that ecosystem, the economics of the relationship change entirely, because now Apple can sell you something far more profitable than hardware. Here's the simplified version of how the App Store works. Every application on an iPhone must come through the App Store. Apple owns the App Store. And Apple charges a 30% commission on every paid app, every in-app purchase, and every subscription transaction that runs through it. That is not a rumor. It is Apple's publicly stated policy. A developer selling a £10 per month language learning app pays Apple £3 of that every single month, from every single subscriber, for as long as those subscribers are on an iPhone. The developer does the work. Apple takes the cut. Every time. Permanently. In 2024, globally, the App Store facilitated $1.3 trillion in developer billings and sales. Apple's estimated commission take for the year was approximately $27.4 billion. That's a third-party estimate from App Figures, because Apple doesn't disclose the line item separately. $27 billion in commission from a marketplace Apple built once and owns permanently. The margin on that is extraordinary. Apple's services division, which includes the App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, Apple Pay, and Apple TV Plus, generated $96.2 billion in revenue in FY 2024. The gross margin on those services, 73.9%. For every pound that flows through Apple's services business, Apple keeps 74 pence after costs. That is nearly twice the margin it earns selling the phone. The phone is not where Apple makes its most profitable money. The phone is the mechanism that gets people into the marketplace where Apple does. There is one more revenue stream that almost nobody mentions when discussing the iPhone's price, because it doesn't appear on the device at all. You have almost certainly never thought about it. You fund it every time you search the internet on your phone. In May 2024, court documents from the U.S. versus Google antitrust case were unsealed. One detail stood out above the rest. Google paid Apple approximately $20 billion in 2022 to be the default search engine on Safari, Apple's built-in browser. One contract, $20 billion, a year. To put that number in proportion, $20 billion is larger than the entire annual economic output of Jamaica. It is a figure that, if it were a company's revenue, would place it among the 200 largest corporations on Earth. Apple receives it for doing essentially nothing, for continuing to set a default that most users never change. Eddie Q, Apple's SVP of Services, confirmed the figure under oath during that trial. He was testifying about the value of Apple's platform to a company as large as Google. The testimony illustrated, better than any annual report, what it is actually worth to have your product in front of 2.35 billion Apple device users. Apple doesn't sell its users' data. It doesn't need to. It sells positions inside its ecosystem, prime placement, default status, guaranteed reach, to companies whose entire business model depends on having that access. Google is the clearest example of what Apple's platform is actually worth to the outside world. Let's put the whole picture together. because the full story is different from what most people assume when they wonder why Apple charges £1,199 for a phone. As of December 2024, Apple had 2.35 billion active devices in use worldwide. Each of those devices is generating services revenue for Apple every month through subscriptions, App Store commissions, and payments like the Google deal, whether or not the owner ever buys another Apple product. Apple's services division grew 13% year-on-year in FY 2024. By January 2025, Tim Cook announced the platform had passed 1 billion paid subscriptions, a billion people paying Apple directly every month on top of whatever device they bought years ago. Imagine you're building a business from scratch. You could sell a product once and compete on price every time the customer needs a replacement. Or you could design a product that, once purchased, plugs the buyer into a revenue stream that compounds for a decade. Apple built the second business. The iPhone is not the product, it is the door. In December 2024, Apple became the first company in history to reach a market capitalization of $4 trillion. That is roughly equivalent to the total annual economic output of Japan, the world's fourth largest economy. That is not how the market values a phone manufacturer. It is how the market values a platform. So, why does Apple charge £1,199 for a phone? And why do people pay? The simple answer is that the hardware is genuinely excellent. The annual R&D budget is $31 billion, and people value quality. That is all true. But it is also the answer that every competitor video gives, and it misses the mechanism entirely. The more revealing answer is this. The price is the entry fee to a system. Not a phone system, a marketplace, a media platform, a payments network, a cloud storage subscription, and, for Google, prime real estate worth $20 billion a year. The £1,199 isn't primarily a price for hardware. It is the cost of joining a business that earns nearly twice the hardware margin on everything you do inside it. And once you're in, Apple has quietly arranged things so that leaving costs more than staying. Your photos live in iCloud. Your messages, your apps, your muscle memory for the interface. The price of the first phone is high. The price of abandoning the ecosystem turns out, for most people, to be higher. In 2007, Steve Jobs said Apple was going to reinvent the phone. What he didn't say, what took another decade to become fully visible, is that the phone was always the smaller part of the idea. Apple reinvented what it means to sell a product, not as a transaction, but as the beginning of a relationship the customer can't easily end. Whether that's brilliant business design or something more troubling is a question worth sitting with.